Welcome into another edition of the Ostrom Avenue podcast. AJ Myers alongside Griffin Bloomstein. We're going to be talking Syracuse men's lacrosse. They got the ACC championship this weekend against Notre Dame. The other side of the bracket is Duke and North Carolina. Winner plays in the championship game on Sunday, so a big game for Gary Gates' group after another disappointing loss to end out the regular season against North Carolina at home. We'll briefly recap that one and then get into what is a huge game against the Irish. Of course, it's a team the Orange did beat in the regular season. But before we get into anything, Griff, the weather this week has been super, super nice. It was a little rainy this morning and a few other days. But other than that, other than some, seasonal allergies, I think it's been pretty solid here.
Yeah, the seasonal allergies are definitely hitting. Not as bad as they might be or sometimes are, but even the lingering allergy is very annoying at some points. I think the main thing for the weather the past couple of weeks is, or this week rather, it was really nice some days.
Hmm.
Like some days you got 70. I think it touched 80 on Monday. Like it was pretty warm on Monday. And then I think it was Tuesday night, it just poured for like an
Hmm.
hour and a half downpour, which was kind of strange. You got a little bit of everything past couple of days. It was a little chilly yesterday for some points. I know that we got some physical activity out there, so we were out and about in the Syracuse spring weather. But May 1st, congratulations, we made it to May. Um, Happy May. May April showers bring May flowers. It's flower time for Syracuse, hopefully. And hopefully that starts with some lacrosse.
Yes, that will be the big thing. The big thing that everyone's kind of rooting for and counting on is that this men's lacrosse team can kind of pull around and turn their season around. But before we get to lacrosse, I want to talk about the NFL draft because there was a lot of hype around it. A lot of, Syracuse players that could potentially get drafted. In total, there was four guys that did get drafted. Plenty of other guys have since gone on to sign for teams after the draft. But the four that heard their names get called, you had to wait till the last day on Saturday. It started in the fifth round with Oronde Gadsden, then Kyle McCord, LeQuint Allen. So the three offensive weapons get drafted, the first three guys, and then one guy on the defense, Fadil Diggs. Griffin, I'm going to be biased here. Of course, I'm going to talk about Kyle McCord first. He gets drafted by the greatest organization in the NFL.
Wait,
He
wait, wait. I thought the Patriots didn't draft a quarterback.
Oh, no, no, no. Wrong. Wrong organization, wrong team. Greatest GM the world has ever seen. Howie Roseman chooses to get another man, another one to add to the QB room, quarterback factory. He gets the local guy, Kyle McCord. I was super excited about it. I kind of had to like double check. I was like, is this real? Like, did he really get drafted by the Eagles? And he sure did. And it's always fun watching the videos of the when the team calls them, assuming that it's actually the team, no prank calls. Uh,
Oh,
when McCord got the phone call and then he told his parents, "Oh, do you know what team?" And they're like, "No." And he said the Eagles, and of course, that's kind of what he grew up rooting for. He's around that Philadelphia area, so really neat to have him. And maybe I'm gonna head out to a preseason game
oh,
and see Kyle
okay.
McCord ball out because I think that would be really cool.
That would be fun. I was not lucky enough to have one of my teams draft a Syracuse player or sign a Syracuse player, but
No,
shout out all the guys that got signed. I know Tom Callahan, the long snapper, Max Mang, the third string tight end, got signed by the Cowboys. A lot of these players are getting signed.
Marlo
One guy,
Wax, he got Cowboys too, right?
Marlo Wax,
Yeah.
Barron, Meeks got signed.
Yes.
Clark got signed. I think of anyone else that got signed and not drafted. That might be it.
Yeah.
But good for all these guys. I mean, this is no Syracuse has not had 10 guys get to NFL roster in years.
No,
And
it's been a
for that
while.
to happen in one draft, let alone like over the course of five, is pretty spectacular. Just shows what Fran Brown is doing here at the helm. Um, the one thing that I was interested in is a lot of coverage and buzz around Oronde Gadsden, who
Yep.
was the first Syracuse player to get off the board. I mean, not that many people would have had that, one. And then two, Jim Harbaugh seems like he's ecstatic to have Rondé Gadsden. Sounds
Yeah.
like the playbook's going to be designed around him. Kind of, not really, probably. But he sounded really uh, energetic about what OG brings to the table. It's just a versatile player in that offense.
Yeah, that is kind of what I'm hearing too. The census is that he will, be a starter essentially. We're going to see him week one lining up with that Chargers offense. And it does make a lot of sense because he can play tight end and he can also play wide receiver. I think he's more of a wide receiver in the NFL. I don't think he quite has the body to stack up against to be a tight end. But he can still, versatilely be used in that role. So yeah, I think out of all the four guys that got drafted, I think the one that's gonna get the most early season looks is definitely Rondé Gadsden. I think everyone else is going to be kind of in a backup role. But I think OG definitely has a chance to really make a good NFL career with Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. In terms of the Syracuse's actual team and the actual roster, the team was a little busy beefing up the offensive line. Now, who these guys will be protecting at quarterback, that's yet to be determined. If it's going to be Stephen Algier or if it will be Ricky Collins. But outside of that, they got Zach Rice from North Carolina. He is 6'5", 305 pounds, which that's a big guy. Like, yes, you got some beef on your offensive line, but then they one up it. They get TJ Ferguson, who is 6'4", 330 pounds, Griffin. This guy is huge from Florida State.
He is a big body, but he also has experience. And I think that's
Yeah.
the important part. Rice was a 5-star committed to UNC. And okay, yeah, you like the 5-star. That's fine. But he didn't get on the field that much.
No.
Now, what's interesting about Ferguson is he was committed to Alabama. He was a
Yep.
highly ranked top 100 recruit, according to some recruiting websites. Played a decent amount, not a lot at Alabama, and then transferred over to Florida State for last year. Started a lot of the games last season. Florida State obviously did not have a season that it was supposed to, but the talent was there. That was a lot on their quarterback and kind of the coaching decisions, if we're going to be honest. Mike Norvell probably should have gone to Alabama. Whatever. That's besides the point. The point is, Ferguson brings experience, which is something Rice might lack, but Rice has that raw potential of being a 5-star recruit. So anytime that Syracuse can beef up the offensive line, it's going to be helpful. You lost a couple of guys, Enrique Cruz. Oh, you know who we didn't mention that got Savion Washington, who was also one of those guys that got signed to an NFL team.
Yep.
Syracuse lost him. He was their starting tackle. A couple of these players you're going to see immediately start. Cam Pringle, another guy that's 6'8", 336 pounds from South Carolina. He's a highly ranked transfer. These are guys that can make impacts on day one. You're going to see that presence that just when Syracuse in the past, when you look at their offensive line and defensive line, they were undersized and committing penalties. Now, they might still commit penalties. Who knows? But at least you know they're not going to be undersized.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think these guys are going to be, especially Ferguson. We're going to see him out there week one, lining up against Tennessee. No other news on the quarterback front. I think that's kind of like what everyone's kind of waiting for, and I think we're going to unfortunately have to wait a while because we won't see either guy, practicing until summer camp rolls around, which isn't until I guess early August, late July. So it's going to be a little while until I think we get any more major football news. But overall, now that the portal's kind of wrapped up, Griffin, do you think Syracuse is okay depth-wise?
I think they are. I think what you're going to see from Syracuse is I think the one more addition that might make an impact is going to be Jonte Cook out of Texas. He's
Yes.
had some off the field issues, but he seems like he's a very good player. Has limited playing time in 2 seasons over at Texas, was previously committed to Washington. But the thing with him, he was a highly ranked recruit. He seems like he has the intangibles, and there was a 24/7 projection for him to come to Syracuse. I know he's interacted on social media with some Syracuse people saying that he's coming up to the 315. So the thing with him is, I think he's going to be good. I'm just going to see where does he slot in? Is he just
Hmm.
going to immediately be Syracuse's wide receiver one? Is he going to go out and compete with Emmanuel Ross, who doesn't have that much experience but knows the Syracuse playbook? So that'll be interesting to see for him. I think the rest of Syracuse's depth chart is pretty in order. Maybe another addition in the defensive backs room or the linebacker room could be interesting to see if Syracuse does that. But overall, I think Syracuse has a very good foundation.
Yes, and I think everyone, we've talked to a lot of people about this. I think the general consensus is the schedule's hard, and it's going to be an interesting season for Fran Brown. And I think the first thing is establishing who quarterback one is. I think that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest question. Two more notes on receivers for me. I know you don't take a lot of, grain into the spring game, neither do I. I thought Justice Ross Simmons did look really good in the spring game, so if they could get him to be an established, wide receiver one or two, that would be huge. And then Trevor Pena, who everyone thought was wide receiver one, he is committed to Penn State. So best of luck to him. Penn State is, I think it's one of the best Penn State rosters ever, people are saying. So maybe Pena will be competing for a national championship. Who knows? Maybe Syracuse will be competing for a national championship. Either way, we'll have all the football coverage, regardless of where this team is competing or who they're competing against here on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Before we hit lacrosse, because I'm excited to talk lacrosse, it's conference tournament season. I want to briefly touch on basketball. No more portal activity for the men's team. It kind of seems like they're done. Unless there's some late drama, I don't think there's going to be any
I think there
huge,
might be some. I think there
maybe,
might be some more additions. Just
maybe.
some like what this roster looks like right now, how many slots they have open. I think there's going to be one or two more additions into this team. I think you can still use another big man. Just
Absolutely.
just you can never have enough big man.
Absolutely. But it's, the options are not great now. I
No.
think the best available has kind of been picked out. But what is interesting is something that the ACC commissioner has discussed about, and that is shrinking the conference schedule. So Syracuse men's basketball, they play a 20-game ACC schedule. Commissioner has pondered to cut that down to 18. Now, what does two games do? Apparently it would help teams in the tournament. Less losses means better RPIs for everyone, not better RPIs, better KenPom for everybody, and it just looks better resume wise for the tournament. Of course, this is all coming out after the ACC had a stinker in the NCAA tournament. UNC, Clemson went out in the first round. Duke made it to the Final Four but lost, and I don't really think the ACC considers Duke an option because they know Duke's going to be good. They're more worried about the rest of the conference that, quite frankly, did not do well at all this season. They were behind the Big East, behind the Big 12, behind the Big 10, and of course behind the SEC considerably in net ranking. So, Griff, how big of a deal this is, I don't really know. It's two less games, nothing official yet, but it's definitely interesting.
It is interesting. I originally misread it, but the fact that Syracuse could be playing two less ACC games, then the question is, okay, who do you replace those games with? Do you do it against teams like Buffalo, Albany, teams that you can get wins and get big wins against? Does that look better for Ken Palm? Does that look better for the RP or the net rankings? Or do you go and take on Villanova? Do you go schedule a game at at Madison Square Garden against St. John's? What does that look like? Are you trying to get wins against good teams, which might be a
Yes.
little risky, or are you going to try to go get 25, 30 point wins, which Syracuse that recently
Now,
has not gotten against bad teams? So that's kind of the 1A, 1B. I don't think we'll see this for the next like 2, 3 years, maybe even 4 years. That's just something to look out for. But it is an interesting topic that you have to discuss.
definitely. I think you make a great point. And I think that's something Alex Klein and Adrian Autry have to consider is scheduling games against Youngstown State, Cornell, Colgate really doing anything for you? Because those three teams were nowhere close to the tournament last year. Those games were quad four wins. That does nothing for you. What if you schedule a home and home with St. John's or something like that for the next 2 years? What if you schedule something at the Garden with maybe it's not UConn, but it's one of those former Big East teams. The fans will be excited about it, and it helps the net rankings. It gets you a quad two win maybe. I think that is definitely something that is more logical and makes more sense. Is schedule tougher non-conference games rather than just kind of banking on a Colgate to really have a great season, and that turns into a quad three or maybe quad two win. I think that's definitely, you make a great point there, and I think that's something that the program should consider. I think it's interesting to note also the ACC, they played an 18-game league schedule back in 2019. The reason they expanded to 20 league games, do you know why, Griffin? This is kind of crazy to me.
Well, then I guess it wouldn't be the additions of Cal, Stanford, and SMU.
No.
So my guess would be because they couldn't travel during COVID.
Nope, it's because of the ACC network. They wanted to fill airtime on the ACC network. So that is why they expanded. Because the ACC network launched in the fall of 2019.
That is true.
So that is why they wanted to add two more games. I didn't know that either until I just read that. So that's interesting. That the reason they're playing more games uh, is to fill games on a network, but it doesn't really surprise me because college athletics is all about money, and that means more money for the ACC. Now to the things that really, really matter. And that's men's lacrosse, and that is Syracuse men's lacrosse, who put up an absolute stinker on Saturday against UNC. Griffin, I was mightily disappointed in this team's performance, especially second half. They just did not look good at all. And then they really frustrated me when they just came alive with 2 minutes to play and nearly came back, but it fell short. I know everyone's talking about the crease violation and whatnot, but for me, you shouldn't even have been in that position. It should have been a game that entire fourth quarter, but they just let UNC walk all over them.
And it wasn't even UNC. It was one player, Dominic Petramala,
Yeah.
son of the cross legend Dave Petramala. He just dominated. He said, okay, Riley Figueres, okay, Billy Dwan, okay, Michael Grace. I don't care who you put on me because I am just better. And that is something you hate to see for Syracuse. This was a defense that was supposed to be very good. And you know what? Jimmy McCool played exceptionally well, all things
Mhm.
considered. Like he had a very good game. He faced a ridiculous amount of shots, and he had 16 saves on 14 goals allowed. That is decent to good against a very good UNC offense. Now, Syracuse just didn't play well. Game in and game out. This was the first time they didn't even get off to a slow start. They scored first. They led 4-2 midway through the second quarter, and then UNC says, okay, we're just going to score 4 goals in a row. I mean, at times the Syracuse team is so good, and then I would say 75% of the time, the past couple of games, they just look lost. Like they just look like they don't want to win, and that's what's scary.
It is, and unfortunately, that the result hurted them in the rankings. They fall to number 12 in the polls, and then RPI wise, they're not looking great. They're at 11th, and they are 0-3 against top five RPI teams. They got one top 10 RPI win. That was against Notre Dame, probably Syracuse's best performance of the whole regular season. I was on the sidelines for that. That was a game where they trailed 3-0. They came back and dominated. They really dominated the rest of the game. It got a little interesting at the end of the third quarter, but they were able to have control of the game. For some reason, they've been unable to replicate a performance since then. Interestingly enough, though, that is who Gary Gait and Syracuse are lined up to play in the ACC championships. It's what they call it. They don't call it tournament. Why they don't call it a tournament, I don't know why, but it's called championship. It's the one versus the four seed. Syracuse is that four seed. Griff, what's your expectations? I think this team, if they can find the performance they put out against Notre Dame at home, sure they can win. But the Irish have also looked really, really good since that loss.
They have. And Syracuse has 2 road wins
Yeah.
against Utah and against Virginia by 2.
Yeah, and
I have
UVA didn't have a good season.
no, I have zero confidence in this team to win a road game, especially against a team like Notre Dame, that if they're playing well, is going to be very hard to beat. Syracuse is going to need to start off on a 3-0 run, have Jimmy McCool on his game, which totally possible, and for Syracuse to not let up the gas on offense. And those 3 things are not going to happen all in one game. We haven't seen it from Syracuse this season, and I don't think it's going to happen again. I think
No.
Notre Dame is going to come out hungry. I think they are a team that can win a national championship if they catch momentum. Obviously, not as nowhere near the talent they had last season. But this is a team that is on national championship pedigree. Like this is a team that thinks they can win it all. And I think Syracuse, they just don't have the hunger. They don't have the desire for it. And it's disappointing because this is a team that was ranked second in the country to start this season.
Yep.
This is a team that was Final Four or bust with a national championship ceiling. And right now, the ceiling looks like the Final Four. And that's like very iffy. This team, if it loses against Notre Dame and there's a bid stealer or two, might not make the NCAA tournament.
It's very possible. And since the Irish, since they lost 14-9 in the Dome, they've beat UVA 12-7. They dominated North Carolina. I watched part of that North Carolina game. They were in complete control. They won 12-6. And that's a team that Syracuse just got walked over. So, and then they beat Penn 10-8. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what Syracuse team shows up. I need the best players to show up. I need Joey Spallini to show up right away. I'm not saying he's been bad recently, but I just need him to show up right away. Get in the goals right away, get an assist. My guy, Owen Hiltz, who I've praised throughout the season, I'm going to criticize him. I think these last few games, he's really gone away. He hasn't been as involved as I've liked him to be. I think he needs to step up as well. I look at a guy like Michael Leo. He needs to be more involved in front of cage, too. I really don't have too much to criticize defensively for this team. I think Jimmy McCool, you praised him, rightfully so. He's been brilliant. Not worried about him. It's more, can this offense just get rolling right from the get-go and keep rolling? That's what they did against Notre Dame. From that first to second quarter, they were on fire. Ball movement was great. Team was humming. It was all looked well. So if they can do that, then sure, maybe they can pull off what would be an upset win over Notre Dame in the ACC championship. Excuse me. Then Syracuse would then play either the winner of North Carolina and Duke. That is the later matchup of the two on Friday. And again, I mean, North Carolina and Duke both beat Syracuse, so it's not like you'd prefer a team out of that win. Whoever you're going to get, it's going to be hard, assuming the Orange can get the win there. And then you mentioned bid stealers. Right now, again, I said at Syracuse RPI is 11th. I think they're going to make the tournament regardless if they lose. I think the problem is, though, regardless if they win or lose this tournament, their first round matchup is going to be hard. I think the biggest worry you have is if Yale upsets Cornell in the Ivy League tournament, and then if they make the championship, then I think Yale could really be a bid stealer, or especially if they win too, because then that means Cornell, Princeton, and I think Harvard is a lock. I think Harvard's making it. So then that would be troubling if Yale has a big Ivy League tournament, and then I think if Rutgers, they're in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament, if they have a big tournament as well, then they could potentially also be a bid stealer. So those are some interesting things to look out for. Griffin, I think we're okay with Syracuse making the tournament regardless of how things shake out Friday.
Yeah, you sounds like you are. I'm not sure. I don't know. And the thing is, like, the interesting thing with this team is like they have all the talent in the world. It's not about talent. It's about hustle. It's about wanting it. Syracuse loves to play physical, but how do you balance physicality with undisciplined lacrosse? And so these are some things that Coach Gate, Coach Orderna, Coach March, like they need to pin into the minds of the Syracuse players. Like play the Syracuse brand of lacrosse. And that's winning. That's what Syracuse's brand of lacrosse is, winning.
It is, and unfortunately, the Orange haven't been able to replicate that winning to end out this season. We talked about it. It was a gauntlet. It was a gauntlet of a schedule to end it. Fortunately, Syracuse didn't really live up to expectations, but postseason time, anything can happen. This team could go on a miracle run, and we'll be here to cover it all here on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Selection for both men's and women's is on Sunday, so keep an eye out for that and where Kayla Trainer's group also ends up. Of course, they bowed out of the ACC championships as well, really early to Stanford. So that's going to be interesting. We're assuming it's going to be a road game for Kayla Trainer's group to start out the NCAA tournament, assuming that they make it. They do have a good RPI, so I'm confident that they'll make it. Griff, before we sign off here, give me a score prediction for Friday.
I'm gonna go 13-10 Notre Dame.
All right, I like that. I'm on I really want to believe in this team because they've shown such good signs, but unfortunately, I think confidence is kind of struck. I think the Irish are going to get the win. I'm going to go 12-9 Notre Dame. So that's our picks for the Friday. Whenever you're listening, recording this on Thursday, right before the ACC championships get underway. Regardless of what happens, we're gonna have all the coverage here on the Ocean Avenue podcast and be sure to listen back to some previous interviews. We've interviewed plenty of lacrosse head coaches this season, so plenty of good stuff to learn about Syracuse men's lacrosse, and other teams across the country as well. And the big game here on Friday, Syracuse going up against Notre Dame. That is a 5 p.m. face-off. McClure Remodeling countdown to face-off gets you going at 4:30 on 88.3, and then be sure to listen to the double overtime all the way up until 8:30 to get your opinions heard. We want to hear you. What are your guys' thoughts on what maybe has been a disappointing men's lacrosse season? Definitely. But that's all the time we have this week for the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Again, be sure to listen wherever you get your podcasts or at WAR.org. And we'll be back next week to break everything down happening on the